I will chew my left foot off. My kid, dirk, dirk, dirk. It's like, shut the fuck up, Ralph.
Lunch is in 15 minutes.
40% of schools have reported vacancies, leading to 55,000 teacher vacancies across the United States. Between the fall of 2020 and spring of 2022, 300,000 teachers quit the profession altogether. And since 1999, 383,000 students have experienced gun violence in school. The average student to teacher ratio is 15.5 to 1. So if we do the math, that's roughly 24,000 teachers experiencing that same violence. And I don't want to be a teacher either after just reading that. That'll be our show, folks. Have a good one.
At the end. God.
300, that's an entire generation, Colin.
But think about
that's all of Gen Z. That's I don't know how many people are actually in Gen Z, but it can't be 10 times that.
I mean, the thing that amazes me about this, like a lot of friends are teacher folks, so I get all these great stories from them. Man, there's some shenanigans that goes down. Like in like that, haha, this would be a funny TV show, but it's real kind of way. I mean, first of all, the gun violence thing has to be talked about. That has escalated dramatically. And yeah, that there and of itself is a great reason not to be a teacher anymore. Like, the missus was a teacher for a while, and I lived in constant fear that was going to be a thing. And
I've heard that from parents about their kids going to school. Like, oh, I'm afraid to send Frankie to school because Frankie's going to bring a gun and shoot Frankie. And it's like, fucking why though?
Yeah. No. But then also think about the difference of like how it was when you and I were in school. If I crossed the teacher, I was dead. Oh my God, the teacher could just make something up and tell my parent, and my parent would be like, you did what? And I was done. I was done for. Now, it's kind of impossible to do that. There are more stories I've heard from teacher friends recently that involve basically parents becoming unhinged and refusing to listen to their teachers. And at that point, like, if you don't have the respect for your job, if you don't actually trust this person to educate your child and basically take care of them for a chunk of their existence each week, God, the least you could do is treat them well. The least you could do.
Well, and when you have parents that aren't checking in with their kids like they should, and that far be it from me to tell a parent how they should parent as someone who isn't a parent. But from the outside looking in, it seems like there's some pretty foundational shit that y'all aren't doing. Like, your kid shouldn't appear as a threat to a teacher. A teacher, a 64-year-old frail woman, 110 pounds, has seen a lot of shit in her day. She's just trying to teach another English class and like love another generation of kids before she goes off and retires and like lives a modest fucking life because that's all she can afford on a teacher's retirement. She shouldn't have to worry about whether or not that weird kid in the corner in sophomore year of school is going to bring in a fucking gun and pop her.
Yeah.
That's insane to me. That is insane to me. And that starts with the parents. That absolutely starts with the parents. This was questioned when Columbine came around. And, this is not a school shooting episode. We do talk about work here, but this is about the job, right? Like, I couldn't imagine the anxiety going into a school knowing that there are required, for very specific reasons, metal detectors, cameras, school resource officers, and to the schools that don't have those or don't require those. I mean, you've made it out alive somehow so far. Yeah. And the so far is pretty imperative there.
Yeah, it's almost a statistic at that point.
It's just a numbers game.
I mean, like, and this will segue nicely into another piece of this topic, but if I were to sell you the teacher position, and let's be real, there's been a decline in pay and all that stuff. Inflation makes that worse. They're expected to do insane hours, pay for their own supplies, even though they're not getting paid near what they deserve. If I were to sell the role to you, though, it sounds really heroic. Like, hey, do you want to spend your lives educating the future of this nation? Like, kids who will respect you and learn from you and grow from you, and just, you get to do this. Like, that sounds so freaking awesome. And, like, for a long time, I thought that would be a great role to go down. And then you do the research and realize that they're dramatically underpaid. They do a lot of work outside of work hours. And then, in general, the pay disparity between, like, the teachers who are really doing everything and then, like, the admin, like, the principals is insane. Some principals make anywhere from like 100,000 to like $180,000 a year. Some make more than that if they oversee multiple school districts. And then they sit
You don't have to
there.
work in school to get paid that, do you? I wouldn't imagine anyway. Like I would think, I graduated with 32 people in my graduating class.
Yeah.
I would have to think that because of that, my principal would be paid less than the public school principal 40 miles north of me who had 400 kids in his graduating classes.
I mean, it all depends. Like, the whole school system's kind of weird in how it pulls from tax money in certain areas, and
That's
it's
true.
a strange system. It's why private schools are kind of like a weapon against public schools, because the more private schools are there, the more they take money from the public schools, which makes the public schools look shittier, which allows the private schools to thrive even harder. It's a really messed up system. But at the end of the day, like, it comes down to that really cool sounding job. Hey, by the way, I forgot to mention, you also might get shot.
Yeah, and all for an average of $66,000 a year. The national average wage is $63,000 a year. So, being a teacher is an absolute average job if we're counting it if we're judging it from a monetary standpoint. And with only $66,000 a year, the last thing we need to do to protect our teachers and our kids in schools, fucking give the teachers guns. I cannot get this argument out of my head. Stop saying we need to arm the teachers. Miss Mowbray ain't going to handle a 357 Magnum when Tyler comes at her. He's the fucking quarterback of, like, he's an animal. Look at the kid. He's been throwing hay bales his entire life. He's 18. He's finally got man strength. Like, Miss Mowbray's going to shit herself.
Yeah. Let's see. So, Whisper in the Woods, who is an ex-teacher, by the by. To add to the messed up system, not all private schools require teachers to have a teaching credential. That means they might hire teachers who never learned how to actually teach.
In Florida.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
In Florida, who, by the way, has the 5th most teacher vacancies per capita. New York, you'll be happy to hear, has the 4th lowest teacher vacancies per capita. So, really just covering the East Coast here.
Yeah.
And in Florida, a few years ago, to combat this teacher exodus, they actually just opened it up to anyone with a bachelor's degree. You got a bachelor's, come on in. You served 4 years in the military, you can definitely teach 6th grade.
I'm not even joking. Little shits.
That's an actual thing you can do. And I can't think of a second worse idea.
God,
like, teaching is it's more than knowledge, man. There's a level of compassion that goes into it. There's a level of understanding and patience and, like, rearing that goes into it. I mean, you're a part-time parent, man. Like, part of the reason that teachers feel overwhelmed and overworked is because they're a part-time therapist, part-time social worker, part-time educator, part-time peacekeeper. And now you want them to be part-time armed security?
Yeah. Oh, and all of that on top of, by the way, we know that wages have not kept up with inflation at all. You're basically an average Joe struggling with the rest of us. I'm going to need you to work really long hours, like 16, 20-hour days as needed. Oh, and part-time nurse sometimes. Not wrong.
and your salary too, right? So you're not getting paid overtime for the 70 hours a week that you have to work.
Yeah.
You know, because you're going to get pulled out of your prep hour. Hey, can you go sub in for, Mr. Frankie over here? He's hungover or whatever, and he's someone to watch his first hour gym class. Yeah. Like, well, I guess because he's also a teacher and I got to support my fellow homies, right? So fuck me in my first hour prep. Like,
that's actually a very common one.
No, I know it is.
Yeah.
I know it is. That's why I brought that up specifically.
Yeah.
You're asking more, you're demanding more, and you're providing less. If we were to look at teaching and judge its value in society based on what we invest in it, it would be among the lowest valued things. And that's insane to me because it's literally the future of the nation.
Yeah.
That you're not investing in.
And then the weird part is, societally, it was very recently that everyone could attend school, and that was such a huge thing. Like, my grandparents talked about it, and how that was game-changing. We could educate every child in the nation. We're going somewhere. This is how, like, America is always relevant. But now it's being treated like this like a leech on the American system. It's not. Like, to flip your logic, if we actually value this the way we should, these should be some of the highest paid individuals in the nation. At least if you just
100%.
treated them like they were paid like babysitters, they would make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year based on how many kids they're babysitting every day.
One 100%. I honestly can't think of a worse time or worse way to spend my time babysitting other people's children. Like I have so much respect for teachers because of that alone. Because I know what I was like growing up. That tack in the chair thing, I did that as a freshman too. Mr. Hamilton, sorry, bud. It wasn't like thinking back, it's fucking hilarious. I know it is. But if I was a teacher and if any teacher sees this and is like, oh, you motherfucker, like, sorry, I was 14, it was 21 years ago. Jesus Christ, it was fucking funny though. But because he sat down, this was
God.
just he didn't even look at the chair, he just walked out of the room.
Yeah, that tracks. I've fallen on barbed wire before. That's the feel.
And dude, it's just like stubbing your toe. You just right on out of the room that you stubbed it in because you don't even want to see anything in that room right now.
Yeah.
That was him, and it was the start to my having become a massive pain in the ass for teachers. I was probably among the worst kids in my school at that point.
Oh no!
And
you're the reason they should be paid more.
Dude, I was a complete degenerate. I was complete degenerate, and having to deal with me. Luckily, my parents knew that I was a fuck up. So whenever the teacher would be like, "Yo, your kid," they'd be like, "We know." And so I was at least somewhat coachable. I can't imagine trying to deal with someone's kids today when the parents aren't coachable. The parents aren't coming in with a coachable attitude toward their kids.
No,
and
God no. Well, and then like add on to it, it's got layers. So the parents aren't coachable. The parents aren't even societally in a position where they want to hear what they've done wrong, why they've done it wrong, da 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 da. But on top of that, admin tends to be like critically incompetent. That is a common story. I got multiple teacher friends. Honestly, we should just start doing interviews with them in the near future. They all have the same comment of like, admin's functionally useless. You might get lucky and have one or two staff that really knows how to keep things going, but like the principals and the vice principals that really should be doing something and making a difference are kind of just figureheads that don't know what the hell they're doing. And then mess up. How so? Let's see. One example. I think I can.
I said politicians, actually.
Oh no, politicians. Yeah. I mean, they
they sound like politicians. They're the like the VP, vice principal, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even know what a vice principal does. I've never had a vice principal. I don't know that I was friends with anyone who had a vice principal, or if they did, they weren't the kind that saw them.
It was always either the principal was the really cool one or the vice principal was the cool one, but I still couldn't tell you what either actually did on school, except for like, we did have an ex-Marine as a principal. That was the best principal we ever had because he ran a tight ship.
Like his hair.
Oh no, it's just.
Oh
God.
Oh, he was aerodynamic. All right. Yeah, he was there to do business. He was there to fly from one classroom to the other.
Oh, the first thing he did was he walked into campus, and this was a grade school. He took our thing. I forget what it was. It was the song for Tripoli. Through the.
Yeah.
The
shores of Tripoli.
And I can't remember that because he changed it all to Conway School. We will wear our colors proudly, blue and white, the best in town. He had us all in the first week memorize that stuff. I still remember it.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. That guy was probably underpaid.
He was military, I would suspect. That's a whole other topic one day.
Though, speaking of the wages, when I would see, when I would watch these interviews, read these interviews and these articles and stuff about why teachers are leaving, it always mentioned pay, but it was never the hang up. The pay was just like we could use a little more pay, but really these are our gripes. And a lot of it was, I would argue, most of what I saw at least, was just being overworked and undersupported.
Yeah.
I can't think of a worse way to live either. Like,
depends depends on the school and how they divide up the responsibilities, but a lot of VPs take care of discipline. That explains why there was definitely some douchebag VPs in
Oh.
my experience. Yeah, when I was a kid. Um, but on your point too, I think altruism is a factor in this because teaching attracts selfless people. It's really easy to manipulate selfless people. Do it for the kids. You don't need to get paid enough. You're providing for children and helping the future of this nation. You're doing this great thing. You're patriotic. You don't need to get paid more. And then as a result, you get these people who are like, okay, that's fair. I can make it by on this pay, but like, I really need these other things. But at the end of the day, really, teachers' unions tend to be toothless in a lot of situations. Everyone needs to stop doing that and start turning around and being like, no, I should be paid $140,000 a year for what I do because I am a valuable piece and I am raising the future of this nation.
Actually, being on that, the what do you say, 110,000? So
140.
Daniel Pink, 100. Okay, so it's not that high. Daniel Pink, Washington Post columnist, he has actually proposed a $100,000 a year salary for teachers. However,
Yeah.
he also proposes 11-month school years. Essentially, and so I was initially like, oh, hold on. Like teachers kind of get that, right? Like they get that sort of break, like for a reason. These kids are ruthless.
Yeah.
But he also said, is like, well, why not? Like we could have kids graduate earlier, smarter. We don't have to have them on the farm anymore. There's no real modern reason to have them out of school in the summer other than it's tradition. And I found those, at least on just like a pure logic level, kind of hard to argue with.
Well, and what's
Pay
3 months
itself
off?
is impossible to argue with. You can't argue with that. It's a 6-figure job, especially when you take into consideration the amount of investment that there has been in police and the military in recent years.
We're the richest nation in the world. We don't actually have money problems. Like,
no,
we just have issues with putting it where it needs to go.
How much is too much to invest in teachers? Is there a ceiling?
I don't think so. Because, I mean, really, like, they're literally doing one of the most important roles in society. Not to always go back to this, but the Mongol Empire, they actually made sure that teachers, they viewed priests as a required thing. So priests of the respective religions, no matter what it was, and doctors, all of them had everything provided for them, and their families were taken care of after their deaths. And they did not have to pay any kind of taxes because they were viewed as literal pillars of society that made the nation better. That's a really smart way to go about it. Always thought year-round school would be better, where you go for a few months and then take a month off. It basically keeps knowledge fresh and allows for reasonable breaks consistently for both teachers and students, and I think would help with burnout. Okay, so this brings up an interesting piece. 3 months off, that's a chunk of time. So if you were to spread it out throughout the year, you'd have this ability to take a lot of 3-day weekends and 1 week off a month, essentially. And I actually experienced that. When I was younger, San Diego and Escondido, not San Diego, Escondido anyway, was on a track system where we had 4 different color tracks, and each one had like 1 solid month off each year. But otherwise, the rest of that time was broken down into 3-day weekends and week off breaks every month or so. And that was great because I was always refreshed as a kid. Like, we would have these breaks, I'd have times with my family, everything would line up for the holidays in general, and then you'd like bicker with your friends of like, oh, you're on blue track, I'm on yellow track. I get before Thanksgiving to Thanksgiving off, not Thanksgiving to after Thanksgiving off. It's so unfair. And now I look back, I'm like, that was a really good system. Our teachers always seemed really dialed in, too. Like, of course, back then, the pay was better considering what everything costs, and we didn't respect our teachers, but we definitely feared them.
Actually, what I had found regarding teachers' wages is that throughout the last 40 years or so, it has stayed basically neck and neck with inflation. So whatever inflation was back then, whatever the dollar's worth back then compared to today, that's whatever they were making back then.
Yeah,
but that just goes to show like there's no real driving force behind trying to get them more money, trying to get them the pay that they deserve, and more importantly, the treatment they deserve.
Okay, this is a thought that just occurred to me, and this is in the same line of like when I talk about executives and directors and bosses of like, why aren't you proud of paying your team? Why aren't you proud of literally providing livelihoods for people? hey, principals, vice principals, and the boards that often oversee schools, why are you not fiercely proud of treating your teachers well? Why are you not trying to uplift and educate them so that they can do the same for the kids? Like, why are we in this race to do the bare minimum or to the bottom, depending on where you're at? Instead of like at this race to be like, I want to be the most prestigious place for people to work in this industry. I want to be the best freaking school in New York. I want teachers to be like frothing at the bit to come work here because they know they have a secure job, they will be taken care of, they will be safe, they will have everything they need, and our students are better off for it.
This is going okay. I didn't actually think of this, but you just brought up a really good point with the oh man, I'm losing it. Shit.
Oh, you're good. We got distracted by the spam bot.
Yeah, no, I did. I looked over and I was like, okay, fucking what again? Damn it. Okay, I got it back. So I hadn't thought about this until now, but when I asked earlier if if there was a number that was too high, if we could invest too much into teachers, and now hot topic or hot take, hot topic, hot take. There has to be a number. There has to be a ceiling where investment has become too much, because if we make teaching too much of a desirable career, too many bad players will join.
I mean, that's always a thing, but I would almost counter if we go with, there's like a functional amount where you're completely satisfied, where you can take care of the necessities, have enough money for emergencies, and save for the future, and have vacations every year. Whatever that amount is. If I recall, for some reason my brain is saying that it's around like $160,000 or something like that was what studies were saying, where basically
it stops to matter.
Yeah, where basically it's where the happiness stops ramping up with the amount of income. And that's where that spot is. Because the bullshit that a lot of groups will push, including principals and boards and stuff and executives in general, is this money doesn't buy happiness. Bullshit, it does. Because it's everything in our society and it gives us the basics.
Here's the thing about money doesn't buy happiness. I'd rather cry in a Ferrari wiping my face with $100 bills. Also, money buys power. Power buys happiness. Humans have the will to power. Money grants you access to that. Period. I don't like, yes, you have to take care of other things. Money in and of itself won't get you happiness. More money probably fucking will help, though.
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
we just need to stop pretending like it won't. That's it. Like a dollar is a dollar, but $1 or $2 is happier.
It's in our nature. Like, this is what literally allowed humans to take off, was we went from hunters and gatherers being like, oh gosh, are we going to have our next meal, to farmers of like, wow, we have so much food now. We can draw things for fun.
Well, so this is a really, damn it, this is a distant topic actually, because we had a food surplus to the point where we just make bullshit and people eat it. There was up until just a few decades ago, or a couple of decades ago rather, there was only 700 ingredients approved in the United States by the FDA.
Dang.
There are now over 10,000. In the rest of the world, it is still that original 700. So we've just made the food surplus into a gruel that we put into all of the other things that we eat, myself included. I'm not excluding myself in this.
No, yeah.
Not by a long shot. And what if the equivalent exists though for teachers? Like, what if we create so many teachers because we have made this career so attractive that we end up getting junk food teachers? We end up getting this gruel of teachers. But and here's, I think, a caveat, not even a caveat, but in addition to that point, these teachers will likely be unqualified, uninterested, and disengaged. Unqualified, uninterested, and disengaged people burn out faster, which is going to lead to an even higher turnover, or at least not a higher turnover, but like a turnover, and just bad teaching.
Well, and I think that's the trick, is that the system has a lot of those checks and balances, but those have also decayed from what I've heard. There's usually stories about like one or two teachers where you're like, I don't know what that person does. Kind of miracle they haven't been fired yet. If the system works right, just like it should in any meritocracy, then there's checks and balances to ensure that, like, if you and I are teaching, we're doing what we need to do. And honestly, a part of that would be kids would need to be a little more dialed in, and also all teachers would have to be respectful to their kids and back and forth and all that goodness. But there would have to be a system that holds the teachers accountable. We've got a baseline of that, but it would also be important to have the students weigh in on it. I feel like Japan's a good example of this, of like, they don't have janitors in their schools because the kids clean the classrooms and the hallways and they take shifts doing it. And as a result, it drills in this respect for the property that you're on. There's still bad eggs, don't get me wrong, but overall, that is mind-blowing to an American teacher. Like, I mean, shoot whispers in the chat and can hear it. Like, how would you handle a whole class of students that cleans the entire class before you arrive, leaves you a snack every single day, and then afterwards goes and cleans the bathrooms? Always has their homework done, always on time, always impeccably dressed. That would break some teachers. Whisper says, make the credential programs better, allow for weeding out those who are going to burn out. Also, many credential programs enforce the first 2 years of teaching that you go to a program where you have a mentor teacher who helps you with your weak points. Oh my god, I wish students would actually clean their rooms, Yancey.
That they probably don't even clean their own bedrooms, though. Let's be honest. Honestly, though, if we're getting real weird about it, like their bedroom's probably not even really that dirty because the light switch hasn't been turned on in a while because they're just playing Xbox or something. The number of kids that play Xbox these days is out of just video games in general, but just out of this world. I keep someone upon those stats too when I am doing this kind of thing. So just like we were talking about before the show started, I'm just being there's something else going on out there that I think I'm gonna have to look into eventually. Today's not that day, but.
But yeah, no, I think that covers it. Of like there are systems that are there. We definitely need to do some interviews with teacher friends. That's an easy one I can get going for us, I think. Maybe group one. Good. But it still comes down to this core piece of like, we can't do any of that without actually treating them better and making them actually work. Like, God, that's all of this. People don't mind working. We all want to be productive, at least most of us. That is humanity. But we don't like working for abusive shitlords.
Especially not when that abusive shitlord is a tax-paying parent who thinks they know everything because they pay your fucking taxes, I guess, or something. They pay your whatever.
Yeah. And the entitlement, we're not teachers. 15-year-olds who are
the entitlement
shits.
that comes from some of these people. I used to work in a gas station. I was an assistant manager there, and it was in a rural area. And I noticed a massive gap in entitlement by age.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, in this rural area that will, for now, go unnamed, it was the Gen Xers and their kids. It was the 45-year-olds and the 15-year-olds that were just by far the most entitled pieces of shit. Not pieces of shit, but most entitled motherfuckers that all ever come in. And by the way, not to get on too much of a soapbox here, but these kids would come in cocky like every week and just throw a $100 bill on to pay for their fucking like pizza and soda they got for lunch. It's $6 and they expect me to give them $94 and change.
You're like, please, the register doesn't even go that high, my friends.
So this is like, I'm already getting a vein in my head thinking about it. If I had to deal with something like that every day for 8, 9, 10 hours, you know, if we're counting extracurriculars, if I'm like a basketball coach or something,
yeah,
I will chew my left foot off. That is a preference. I just have so much respect for the people that have the patience for that, because I know damn well they don't have the patience for that. But they do this and then they go home and then they probably do that a lot, you know. I've seen that. Like I used to have USC teacher friends.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, man.
So
how do you handle an entitled kid then? Like, I know this isn't a parenting episode, but
that's the art, and that's why they deserve all this pay. Is like, from the conversations I've heard them have, and I'm sure Whisper might chime in on how, you know, she handled some of them. In my experience, she was one of those teachers where lots of people flocked to her. Like, she had a pretty dedicated, loyal following, and at times she had to kind of be like, hey, pay attention, and like go off on people. But she also cared about students and did well and like made sure that they were supported, which sometimes... Would
you almost have to like befriend... I'm thinking from the perspective of a teacher right now. If I had a rough classroom or even a couple of rough students and parent-teacher conferences were coming up or something, PTA meeting, whatever.
Yeah.
Would it behoove me to side on some way, in some way, with the parents in order to get better behavior from the child? I know this is like way out
Very
of
theoretical.
our scope of what we plan on talking about today, but I'm just trying to think of a way that a teacher can be an advocate for themselves in the classroom. A teacher who is still a teacher, especially because your job is not getting any easier as the days go on. And I imagine this has to be one of the biggest. And you probably don't want to hear from people who don't have kids yet about how to manage other people's kids. But
I mean, Whisper says I didn't give attention to entitled students most of the time. Starved them out.
Really?
Smart move. I mean,
that's
and then
awesome.
With
don't
parents,
feed the trolls.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, imagine with parents, it depends on the parents. You know, you probably have some where you could do that and buddy with them. Yeah, like she's saying, not all parents are your ally. I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing, and you don't want to degrade yourself by like giving in on a position that's important and making the parents feel more powerful. They could just take that and run with it. Because at the end of the day, it shouldn't even be a power trip. It should just be the parents coming in and being like, how is my student doing? Are they behaving and treating you well? They aren't. Well, that sounds like a little bit of a failure to society. Let me go talk to the little bugger.
So the disrespect was one of the biggest pain points I had encountered in reading for today's episode. Yeah. It was coming from the parent that I would then have to get the principal involved in to protect myself. And the fact that you had to use the language protect myself kind of tells me everything I need to know about what it is to be a teacher in America. That sucks. Yeah. But that's what we're here to talk about. That's what we're here to figure out. Try to anyway, you know. I think that level of disrespect sucks, and I think it's because there's a massively wrong narrative going on about the school curriculum, as if like we'll introduce critical race theory in this conversation, just so I can put it as a thumbnail. CRT right there, thumbnail, boom, thousands of views. So critical race theory is a very complex, far beyond my scope of legalese, but it's very complex legal theory. It's not anything beyond a legal theory. And so many people seem to think that teachers have the time to teach this to adolescents who don't even know how to piss out their own penis yet. Like they're still getting it on the pants, you know?
Yeah.
I have to think that the narrative around teaching is so bad now for certain people, for a certain group of people, potentially on the right-hand side of things, largely, that combating that just has to be done in the way of trying to take back that narrative, trying to take hold of your public vision. Like, I think a large part of the reason that teachers are underpaid also is because of this narrative around what they're teaching. Like the rise of homeschooling by people who are so unfit to be homeschooling anyone has been.
Students reflect their parents'
horrifying.
Views in narrative, is what Whisperer says, and that tracks. But I mean, I think what you're getting at too is this important piece to it of there's a lot of entitlement in the current generation that's in power, like kind of boomers down, like millennials have some middling to fair power, and it's not really there. We're kind of out of it, right? But my parents would never have dreamed of barging into a schoolroom and telling the teacher how to do something. That wasn't even in their minds. Like when you joined the board as a parent, or the parent, whatever they call the parent council, was probably cringing somewhere about that.
The PTA.
Thank you, the PTA. It was really like, hey, let's make sure the water coolers are restocked in the hallways. Let's make sure you got a little extra budget. Let's get pizza for the kids on these days and have them around. It was stuff like that. When we have people who, I guess this always just is going to be my thing. The teachers are specialists. They are trained. They have an education for this. They know what they are doing. They know how to teach your students. When you barge in and say, nuh-uh, I'm a retail manager and I've decided that all of your education means shit. I'm a CEO and your education means shit. I'm a dentist and your education means shit. What the heck? If we walked into a dentist's office and said, hey, I don't think you're doing that filling right, I'll tell you what, I do digital marketing. Let me show you how it's done. I'd be arrested.
Preach, motherfucker. Like, I can't imagine a more insulting thing than a C-average student who barely got out of high school alive and who did nothing but drag his fucking knuckles, just like I did, for
This guy,
years.
I almost
Come
spilled this
in
drink on myself right as you were saying that. That would have been perfect.
for years though, dragging your knuckles across the floor and scraping them on hubcaps and shit just to go in and yell at someone who potentially has a fucking doctorate in biology or something.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be like, I know this better than you, my kid, dirk. It's like, shut the fuck up, Ralph. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm the teacher here. I'm the one who has been trained to handle these kids and form their minds. Do you want to do my job, Ralph? I'll go and change the fucking oil. Do you want to do this? This is way harder than your job. Infinitely harder than your job, Ralph.
Yeah. And hey, if you're changing oil, if you're doing digital marketing, all this other stuff, you tend to focus on one task at a time. You have anywhere from 14 to I was in classes with 45 kids with no teacher's assistant, just one poor teacher running that whole class. 45 different things to focus on and try to get them to focus on one topic. When all we could think about was, hey, lunch is in 15 minutes. And that was tame compared to some of the stuff now.
No way I'd be able to look at a sea of 45 children and be like, I got this.
I think I would have more performance anxiety for that than I did a small town play and we ended up with 300-ish people in the audience. I think I would rather perform unprepared for 300 people than 45 students just staring me down and knowing that I gotta come back tomorrow and do it again. And again 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 and again.
If I was a teacher and I had a 45 student class, I hope I'm the gym teacher because every day we're playing dodgeball.
I was just going to say dodgeball. Fight for me, you little shits.
Dude, I'm going to get a throne and a velour cape, purple with the white and black, ruffle around it. And
Game of Thrones.
Fortuna every time they come out. It's like,
just have the Game of Thrones throne, but it's broken baseball bats and hockey sticks and dodgeballs that are deflated on it, and just.
Oh man, dude! Speaking of shit that shouldn't be in school, my junior year, or maybe my sophomore year, I think it was my junior year. The senior class, their prank was shit you can't do today. Their prank was hanging deer legs all across the school ceiling. Like in the gym, you'd have the grill fence garter grate thing over the clocks. They just stuck deer legs up in there. God. Just all over the school.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying. I'm kind of circling back around to the more terrifying topic that we started on earlier. You want to talk about school shootings, that's a school threat. You're leaving carved up animal pieces laying around.
Yeah, that's the beginning of a bad movie. Whisper says, I remember crying when I got my roster one year and seeing 35 students were going to be jammed into my art room.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And art class too. Unfortunately, kids generally have less respect for art teachers. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they seem to come across as more fun or something. Maybe it's not it doesn't feel like a standardized class, even though you are learning color theory and stuff like this.
Yeah.
I would have a breakdown. Honestly, I would weep.
Yeah, no,
I would spike my coffee in the morning, every morning.
I mean, her room is not exactly big. I remember her fretting about how are we going to get all the desks in there? Because you need room for this. And then it was also during post-COVID, so there were minimum distance restrictions and things like that, and no one cared. They weren't going to hire extra resources. They weren't going to dedicate stuff to it.
On the point of small classrooms, the average classroom in the United States is 900 square feet. Which is about the size of a 2-car garage.
I mean, that's a lot of the ones in the East Coast don't have air conditioning, at least in the Northeast, because they never needed that historically. And now that we're having heat waves and massive humidity increases, it's bad. It's really bad. And instead of just being we'll fix it, there's no budget.
Do we have heat waves, or are we just under an air conditioning invasion?
I mean, the humidity gets to 95% here.
Yeah, same. Tell me about humidity, son.
That's fair. You're in Florida.
Humidity's different up there, though. I will wholly admit that humidity in Florida, honestly, coastal Florida anyway, is not all that bad.
Yeah, it
gets
here.
Thick, but you get that breeze.
It's heavy here, and then when the breeze doesn't go, fuck.
One thing I found that was super interesting about, and I believe it's probably the last topic we have time for this segment.
Yep.
One thing I thought was super interesting and that really just irked me. Teachers make up 8% of the college educated workforce, yet have one of the lowest rates of return for a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
Pilots, for instance, train 3 to 5 years, and they come out with roughly a $95,000 entry salary.
Yeah.
Nurses, basically the same. You get a BA in nursing, now you're making 110K a year. Just pick one.
Yeah.
Accounting, 90K a year, 4-year degree.
Yeah.
Dentist, dental assistant, 2-year degree, 80K or 70K or something like that. Like,
Yep.
Dude, it's not even worth it from an investment level. Like, if I were a finance guy, I would say don't do that.
Yeah,
I would say absolutely don't do that.
Yeah, and like it shouldn't be that. It basically makes it a kind of defunct area to go into because it's like you said, it's just going to maintain that level with inflation and always be in your discomfort zone. Like that sucks.
Yeah.
And let's be real.
Well,
I remember when 40K a year was you made it, and now 80K a year is like you're okay.
I think the going train of thought is essentially like 75K a year for an individual salary is middle class. That's modern day, like lower rung
declining.
of actual middle class.
Yeah,
or maybe like even middle rung, actual middle class. But
it's declining heavily because like basically the minimum wage for a couple to like have a comfortable existence right now is around $110,000, and that's the lower end of the spectrum.
at least in California, if you're teaching in a low income school for 5 years, your loans would be forgiven, at least in part, but you had to be in low income area for 5 years.
And that doesn't necessarily scream a good time.
However, low income area doesn't have to mean inner city. They can just mean rural, undereducated, and I recognize the implications in me saying, no, you don't have to go to the inner city to teach.
Oh no, that was one of my first thoughts.
That's dangerous. Don't do that. I understand what I just said. Don't crucify me. Statistically, though, like, look, numbers don't lie. People do. So statistically, the inner city is lower educated, more dangerous. The outer city is lower educated, less dangerous. So.
Well, and then they have their own way. Like, there's certain ways city kids get in trouble. And as a country boy, I can tell you there are country versions for all of those things.
Holy shit. That's actually a really good point I never thought of, because urban kids really do get in trouble for things like vandalism and drug use and stuff like that. Like, country kids get in trouble for flipping hay bales and like wrecking the truck.
Vandalism. No, I had a friend.
Vandalizing the hay rack, you know.
But I had a friend who gave me shit for this. I guess it was my last point before we swapped topics. He used to give me shit for it because he came from a relatively well-off family. I was always going to nice schools. And I remember he was like, Colin, you don't understand. In my schools, we have drug dealers. And I was like, you don't understand. Where I live, we have drug grows.
But yeah, where do you think your drug dealers get it?
Yeah, exactly. They don't fucking grow it down at Macy's. It's up in the goddamn hills where my clan lived.
Oh, man. We used to... Yeah, okay. I think that's actually roughly a good spot.
Yeah. To swap
to cut off. Yeah, sir. Swap the topics. Let's do this quick outro. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We stream every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. EST. We'll see you next week. Stay safe out there, people.